For nearly 800 years, much of Spain and Portugal, known historically as Al-Andalus, was ruled by Muslim states. During this time, Islam prospered in the region, leaving behind some of the most stunning examples of architecture, science, literature, and culture that Europe has ever seen. Yet today, Muslims are only a tiny minority in Iberia. What happened? How did a population that once formed the majority across vast parts of the peninsula almost completely disappear? The story begins in the year 711. Muslim forces, led by the Berber commander Tariq ibn Ziyad, crossed the Strait of Gibraltar from North Africa. At the Battle of Guadalete, they defeated the Visigothic king Roderick, and within a few years, most of Iberia fell under Muslim control. What followed was the rise of Al-Andalus, a collection of Muslim-ruled states that would last, in some form, for centuries. Al-Andalus became a place of immense cultural and intellectual flourishing. Cities like Córdoba and Toledo grew into major centers of learning. Córdoba, in particular, boasted libraries with hundreds of thousands of manuscripts at a time when much of Europe's knowledge was restricted to monasteries. Muslim scholars advanced medicine, astronomy, philosophy, and mathematics, while also preserving and translating ancient Greek texts that would later fuel the European Renaissance. But Al-Andalus was not a purely Muslim society. Christians and Jews also lived in these territories as protected communities, known as dhimmis. Though they paid special taxes, they were allowed to practice their religions and participate in everyday life. This created a unique, though sometimes tense, coexistence between the three faiths. For centuries, southern Iberia maintained a Muslim majority population, while the north remained Christian. Yet, from the very beginning, there was resistance. Small Christian enclaves in the northern mountains of Asturias, León, and Navarro survived the Muslim advance. Over generations, these Christian kingdoms regained strength. What followed became one of the longest wars of reconquest in history, the Reconquista, lasting nearly 800 years. The turning point came in the 11th century, when the once powerful Caliphate of Córdoba collapsed. Instead of a united Muslim power, Iberia fractured into a patchwork of smaller states, called taifas. Though brilliant culturally, these kingdoms were weaker militarily. Their division gave northern Christian kingdoms the opening they needed. Battles like the capture of Toledo in 1085 signaled the slow but steady shift in power. By the 13th century, Christian forces surged forward. Córdoba, Valencia, and Seville fell into Christian hands. Portugal completed its reconquest by 1249, while the Crown of Castile and the Crown of Aragon pushed southward in Spain. By the mid-1200s, the once great territory of Al-Andalus had nearly vanished. Only the Emirate of Granada remained, a Muslim stronghold in the south that managed to survive for more than 200 years. Granada not only endured, but flourished as a jewel of Muslim architecture and culture, producing treasures like the Alhambra Palace, which still stands today. But its days were numbered. Surrounded and politically isolated, Granada existed at the mercy of its powerful Christian neighbors. Finally, in 1492, the Catholic monarchs Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile completed the Reconquista. Granada surrendered, marking the end of Muslim-ruled Iberia. The fall of Granada is often romanticized, but for the Muslim population, it ushered in a new age of oppression. Initially, the surrender agreements promised Muslims the right to keep their religion, language, and traditions. For a brief moment, coexistence seemed possible under Christian rule, but soon these promises were broken. Pressure mounted to convert to Christianity. Laws banned Islamic practices. Mosques were converted to churches. Arabic language was outlawed, and entire communities were forced to abandon their heritage. Those who converted became known as Moriscos. Many did so reluctantly, and large numbers continued practicing Islam in secret while living outwardly as Christians. This secrecy brought them under the suspicion of the Spanish Inquisition, an institution notorious for its ruthless pursuit of heresy. Any sign of Islamic practice, a prayer spoken in Arabic, a hidden Quran, or even certain customs like washing rituals could lead to torture, imprisonment, or execution. The Moriscos struggled to survive under these circumstances. Some communities rebelled, most famously in the Alpujarras Rebellion of 1568, when Moriscos in the mountains of Granada rose up against forced assimilation. Though fierce, the rebellion failed, and the survivors were scattered across Spain to break their communal strength. By the early 16th century, the Spanish crown had grown weary of the Moriscos, seeing them as a fifth column, always suspected of secretly aiding Ottoman or North African Muslim powers. In 1609, King Philip III issued a decree ordering the total expulsion of Moriscos from Spain. Over the next 5 years, hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children were forced onto ships and sent across the Mediterranean, usually to North Africa. The journey was brutal. Many died from starvation or attacks by pirates, while those who survived often faced suspicion in their new homes, seen as outsiders who had lived too long in Christian lands. This expulsion was devastating. Some estimates suggest as many as 300,000 Moriscos were removed, representing a significant portion of Spain's population at the time. Entire villages were emptied, families torn apart, and the cultural fabric of Iberia was violently unraveled. In Portugal, the Muslim community had already suffered a similar fate, with conversions and expulsions taking place even earlier. By the mid-16th century, the once Muslim-majority Iberian Peninsula was now firmly Catholic, with Islamic culture suppressed and nearly erased. Yet, in reality, not all traces of Islam disappeared. Some Moriscos were never expelled. They stayed, blended into the Christian majority, and over generations, their descendants quietly merged into Spanish and Portuguese society. Genetic studies today show strong traces of North African and Muslim ancestry across the Iberian Peninsula, suggesting that even though the religion was stamped out, the people themselves never fully vanished. And the legacy of Al-Andalus continues to live on. The breathtaking architecture of the Alhambra, the Great Mosque of Córdoba, and the Giralda of Seville keep the memory of Islamic heritage alive. Spanish language itself carries hundreds of Arabic loanwords, a reminder of centuries of coexistence. Advances in medicine, agriculture, mathematics, and philosophy pioneered in Al-Andalus left their fingerprints on the Renaissance and shaped the Western world. So what happened to the Muslim majority of Spain and Portugal? The answer is a story of conquest, forced conversion, cultural suppression, resistance, and eventual exile. But it is also a story of resilience, where despite centuries of persecution, the memory and influence of Islam in Iberia endures. Today, Spain and Portugal stand as countries deeply influenced by their Islamic past, even if that past was nearly erased. The story of Al-Andalus is not just a tale of what was lost. It is also a reminder of how cultures shape one another and how identities, though suppressed, can never be completely destroyed.